Hello, Canucks fans, and welcome back to another episode of Canucks Conversation, brought to you as always by the 2024 Toyota BZ4X. The BZ4X is Toyota's brand new all-electric SUV designed to go the distance for you and your family. The BZ4X is packed with Toyota's coolest tech, but it still has that trusty SUV feel you know and love, and even though it's electric, it's capable of effortlessly conquering any terrain, whether it's rain, snow, mud, or your friends' questionable post-game recaps. The BZ4X will get you through it all. Dave Quadrelli alongside Harmon Dial. It is an episode of Canucks Conversation where we're going to try to stay a little bit more on topic today. I know we were joking a lot that the offseason officially started yesterday, talked a lot of baseball. I don't even remember what we talked. Oh, weather. I got some texts about becoming a weatherman. There were some fired up weather people listening to that episode that messaged me, and I found out some stuff, but I'll save it. I'll save it for later in the offseason. I learned some stuff about the weather. And if you missed yesterday's show, I always tell you to check it out. You might be able to just skip that one. Player availabilities are tomorrow, so we're going to have a busy show tomorrow. But Harmon, I thought today it would be fitting to kind of look at Canucks letter grades for this season and the postseason. Regular season letter grade and a playoff letter grade relative to expectations. We're writing something right now at Canucks Army. Mike Liu wrote the article about 5 players who exceeded expectations the most in the playoffs. And then obviously you and Drance as well over The Athletic did your report card. So anything else you want to say about this as we kind of set it up?
No, just that we beat you to the punch in getting our report cards out.
You did. You know what? You did. You absolutely did. You absolutely did. And yeah, you know what? You know what though, Harm? Like, there's not nearly enough friendly banter of like Athletic versus Canucks Army on this show. Like, we went all season. That's like the first jab. I mean, I've taken them at the Athletic, but like that's gonna be the first jab you've ever thrown.
Probably, and it's part of it is because like half of what I do in the regular season is national coverage now. So I can't realistically compete with the volume of content that you guys put out. And what, you guys have like 12 freelancers? Like, it's just me and Drance. You guys have us what are you guys paying people that you guys have like a staff of 20 writers?
Hey, I'm not disclosing that. We pay everybody now, though. That was the thing that used to not happen all the time at Canucks Army. But that was one of my goals when I took over Canucks Army. Said everybody's gonna get paid, and everybody does get paid now. So yeah, except for the intern that was listening to this. Although, shout out to Jag. I'll give him a shout out. Jag Lolly, he was our intern from BCIT. He absolutely crushed it on his internship, and he pivoted into a paid role with us. So I'm really excited. Bringing him on literally today. Today's his first day, and he did such a good job during his internship, and we're bringing him on. And yeah, shout out to Jag.
Also, in Jacob, all seriousness,
yeah.
I was just gonna say, in all seriousness, you guys crushed it all year. Like, for as much as I love the friendly banter, I think we're both outlets are killing it.
Yeah, let's leave it at that. We'll leave it at that and appreciate the kind words, of course. Okay, we've got some early submissions for anyone else, but we'll save them for anyone else later into the episode. Let's get to this first segment. We're gonna do Canucks player letter grades, and this segment is brought to you by our friends over at Wendy's. Frozen pucks are awesome when they're in the back of the other guy's net, but that doesn't mean you'd want to eat one. That's why Wendy's only ever uses fresh Canadian beef that's never seen the inside of a freezer in all of their burgers. Whether you order a Baconator, Dave Single, or even a JBC, you'll only ever find real fresh beef that's juicy and loaded with fresh toppings. So download the Wendy's app, check out the latest deals, and order a burger that's only job is being delicious. Okay, Harm, how do you want to go about this? Like, do you want to start with forwards and then move to defense? Okay, cool.
Yeah, let's do that. And let's generally start with like top players and then working our way down through depth guys.
Okay, that's kind of how I made my list too. So we'll go basically just from the top down if you're looking at the Canucks lineup, and obviously there's going to be some guys, I don't know how far down we'll go. There might be some that we throw out on the fly and just have to go with, because I have 20 names on my list, and I know there's more than 20 names, so I forgot someone. So we're going to go through this list, but obviously we're going to start at the top. Let's start with JT Miller. Regular season, relative expectations, I gave him an A+.
Yeah, same, A+.
Okay, playoffs?
I had him an A-.
Okay, I had him as a B+. I thought he was really, really good, but I thought the infamous text game where it was, yeah, I'm sorry about how bad I played, and I know he responded really well. that really hurt his letter grade for me when I was looking at, relative to expectations. And I also took into consideration that because he exceeded expectations so greatly in the regular season, I just naturally had a bit higher expectations for the playoffs. Maybe I'm being a little bit too harsh because he really was their best player in the playoffs. But I also looked at that game 7 performance and just said, like, yeah, you know what? It was another one of those games where you wanted to see more from JT Miller. So ultimately I gave him a B plus, but an A minus as well is very, very defensible. I also think a B plus is a good grade. Like, that's a good grade to get.
Yeah, it's splitting hairs at that point. The reason I gave him a bit of a bump is just the way I looked at it is he tied Boeser for the club's playoff scoring lead. He won nearly 60% of his faceoffs. He was heavy physical with his style of play, and he excelled defensively too. Like the Canucks only conceded 1.81 goals against per hour during Miller's 5-on-5 shifts. And ultimately in that Edmonton series, even though he struggled in games 6 and 7 offensively, it was pointless. Ultimately, the Canucks held McDavid to a 2-2 draw in 5-on-5 goals during the 58 minutes and 49 seconds that Miller played head-to-head against McDavid. So I gave him a bit of an edge considering that context of, well, he played matchup minutes against McDavid there.
Okay, Brock Boeser, he's my only A plus, and obviously Thatcher Demko. Like, what are we doing, right? We're not gonna split hairs on Thatcher Demko, but Brock Boeser, in terms of guys who played all of the playoffs, I know he missed one game at the end there, but Brock Boeser is my A plus player. A plus in the regular season, A plus in the playoffs.
Yeah, I had him A regular season, A plus playoffs, so pretty much the same thing.
I also kind of wrestled with that a bit just because it felt like, obviously he scored 40 goals, which is awesome. But like there were some stretches there where he was less effective than you would have liked. So again, A plus. Again, let's try not to split hairs too much there, but I think that's a good letter grade. Okay, Elias Pettersson. What did you put for this? Because Elias Pettersson's season was a tale of two halves. After the All-Star break, he was much less effective in all areas of the ice, and that kind of went into the playoffs as well. So ultimately, I had Elias Pettersson relative to expectations. I know he put up points again. I had Elias Pettersson at a B minus for the regular season. I had him at a C plus for the playoffs.
I had him at a B plus for the regular season and a C minus for the playoffs.
C minus, okay.
Yeah, like, sure, 89 points. That's probably closer to the floor of what Pettersson's capable of. But ultimately, there were only 6 full-time centers in the NHL that had more points than Pettersson. And you look at those names, and it was McKinnon, McDavid, Matthews, Draisaitl, Miller, and Sidney Crosby. So ultimately, even in a season where he struggled down the stretch, I think we forget how dominant he was in the first half of the season too. Like, this is a player that entered the All-Star break on pace for 47 goals and 107 points. Right. I think we forget that just because he's struggled now for what's felt like 2 or 3 months. But I thought he fared. I still think he brought the goods overall in the regular season, and then playoffs, I think it was harsher than you on him.
Okay. I know we said we were sticking with top players, but let's go in order of the lineup. Next up, Ilya Mikheyev. I had him at a C minus for the regular season and a D plus / buy this guy out for the playoffs.
I had him a C plus for the regular season and an F for the playoffs. It's the only F that any player has gotten in these letter grades. I was a little bit higher in the regular season just because it's remarkable looking at the first 2 months what the numbers look like. I actually want to pull it up because it's hard to believe, and I have to command F it. So just give me a second here.
Take your time. And for those that missed yesterday's show, we opened yesterday's show by seeing that Rob Williams, our pal over at Daily Hive, wrote an article about if the Canucks should buy out Mikheyev, and it was a bit of a pros and cons thing. And Harmon and I, right before the show, were like, we haven't done the math on it. We haven't looked at the buyout calculator, the savings the Canucks get, all that. And we looked it up, and immediately I was like, no, they have to buy out Ilya Mikheyev. Like, it has to happen. It's not even a conversation in my mind.
Yeah, so this is actually wild to think about. This is right before the calendar flipped to 2024, so December 31st. Mikheyev ranked top 25 among all NHL forwards with 10 5-on-5 goals in 32 games, which was tied with Sam Reinhart, Robert Thomas, Braden Point, and Alex DeBrincat. And his 19 5-on-5 points in that same stretch were one back of Elias Pettersson and JT Miller for the lead among Canucks forwards.
Wow.
Like, isn't that incredible? The first 2 months of the season, he was actually on one.
So this is recency bias against me, I suppose, because I was ready for the failing grade. Like I said, C-, right? C- for Mikheyev. Yeah, C- regular season, D- for the playoffs. Yeah. Yeah, that is surprising. And honestly, I did forget that. But we're going to save, like we said yesterday, we're saving the Mikheyev buyout conversation for at least next week. Let's move down the list a little further here. I have P.S. Suter next, is the next name I have written down.
Cool.
What do you have for him?
I had an A- for him in the regular season and a B- for him in the playoffs.
Okay. I had an A for the regular season because I thought he was very versatile. And again, an A- and an A, you probably are saying all the same reasons as me. Very versatile, made that Miller line better, fit in really well with them. And if there's no P.S. Suter playing the way he played, the Canucks have a lot more problems in the regular season. So I went with an A there, and then I thought the Magic kind of died in the playoffs, so I had him at a B in the playoffs. Okay, now we're getting to the fun names here. Dakota Joshua, relative to expectations, and I don't know where you, not to get too technical into what we're measuring here, but expectations for me also include Rick Tocchet calling you out on the first day of camp. Like, to me, that lowers your expectations quite a bit. Or in fact, I guess it raises them for what the coach expects of you. But if we were doing projections at the start of the year, Harm, I didn't project this season for Dakota Joshua at all. He is going to make a lot of money in free agency. I have Dakota Joshua at an A+ for the regular season, but then I have him at a B+ for... what did I have him at? Hold on, I actually have to look. No, excuse me, I had him at a B for the playoffs. I had him at a B. Had a couple strong game ones, but really, Jeff said it yesterday. Jeff Patterson, when he was on our show, pointing out threw a lot of hits, did a lot of different things when you look at the score sheet. But how many games did Dakota Joshua really leave a mark on? I think it's 2 or 3 is the answer out of all the games the Canucks played in the playoffs.
Yeah, totally fair. And the other thing to keep in mind is, like, he had the 4 goals, but he only had 9 shots on goal in the entire playoffs, which is pretty crazy to think about. So if even a couple of those hadn't gone in, I mean, that's pretty fortunate when you look at that shooting percentage, right? So that could have easily impacted the bottom line production. So I had him at an A- in the regular season and a B- in the playoffs. The only thing to keep in mind as we sort of discuss his performance in the playoffs is he was adjusting to more difficult matchups, right? So during the regular season, that line with him and Garland was consistently going up against the opposition's third line. But in the playoffs, because now they had Elias Lindholm, Rick Tocchet had a ton of defensive trust in Lindholm, and because Pettersson was struggling and was mostly getting third line matchups, that Joshua Garland line was seeing a lot of Ryan O'Reilly in round 1, was seeing a lot of Leon Draisaitl in round 2. So that's, of course, context to keep in mind. But look, in the regular season, they were dominant together, right? Their underlying numbers, possession, goal differential, one of the best lines in the NHL from a statistical perspective. And that just didn't quite translate to the playoffs where, yeah, they had their spurts where they took over and won games. But I think you were definitely left looking for a little bit more out of Joshua in the playoffs, considering how strong he was in the regular season.
Okay, so sticking with this line, I have Connor Garland next. I have him at an A and an A. Not an A+. I had him at an A in the regular season and an A in the playoffs. I'm not going to nitpick and try to pick negatives, but one thing that came to mind was that he had stints with Elias Pettersson, and if it was an A+, you'd hope he could maybe drive a top 6 line a little bit more than we actually saw in the regular season. So I don't know how much of that is against Connor Garland, but I had him at an A. And I had him at an A in the playoffs as well.
Yeah, I had him at an A in the regular season and a B+ in the playoffs. I mean, his passion, his competitiveness, a lot of those intangibles, right? One of the only players to actually show up with some jump, with some urgency, with some desperation in a game 7. And to me, to have that type of playoff performance, that cements him in my mind as, I don't know if you want to call him necessarily a core player, but he's not expendable anymore to me. Like, he's a guy that I need as a driver in my middle six now, especially since we don't know what's going to happen with Joshua. He may walk in free agency. I think this is a year where he went from potential misfit to, geez, he's one of the most important drivers in this lineup.
Okay, Teddy Blueger, part of the line, right? Like, he's part of the line for most of the season. I had Teddy Blueger at a B in the regular season and a C plus in the playoffs. I thought really good, really exceeded expectations to start the year. And that's going to be the topic of our poll question, is who exceeded expectations the most in the playoffs. Teddy Blueger exceeded expectations a lot in the regular season to start, but then by the end, the magic just seemed to kind of be gone, and he was fine. Like, he was playing like a fourth line center, which is what you thought you were getting when you got him. But especially in the playoffs as well, it kind of became evident that the magic just wasn't there on that line when Teddy Blueger was a part of it.
Sure, but I also cut him some slack because his fourth line mates were frankly pretty terrible. Like, Sam Lafferty fell off a cliff. We're going to be talking about him. Hit a lot of fieldy Giuseppe, some Nils Aman, some Vasily Podkolzin. Like, he didn't have many actually good wingers on when he bumped down the lineup to play in a fourth line role. And ultimately, to me, this is a player who was signed to be a fourth line center. He chipped in with 28 points in the regular season, and he was clearly the third wheel on that line with Joshua and Garland. But to me, if you're able to step into a role as a third line center when you're not really a 3C, and that line becomes one of the best third lines in the NHL, like, that's a massive credit there. So I had an A minus, I believe, for Blueger in the regular season and a B minus in the playoffs. I also give him a lot of credit because of what he did to help turn the penalty kill around as a first unit fixture. I think that impact was massive.
Yeah, I think your grade is a little more fair than mine when it comes to Teddy Blueger. Okay, now we're moving down the lineup quite a bit. You mentioned him, Sam Lafferty, had him at a C plus in the regular season and a C in the playoffs.
So I hated Lafferty's playoffs, C minus. I just was left wondering, where's the speed, the size, the physicality that we saw from him in the regular season. Now, the regular season, I give him a B plus, which might sound high, and I know he faded down the stretch, but he chipped in 13 goals, right? And during the first half of the season, like, remember when he was first acquired with Blueger out, I believe, he was centering the fourth line, and not just centering it, but legitimately driving play, scoring goals. He was putting defenders on their heels. He was drawing penalties. Like, he was so noticeable and impactful on a night in, night out basis. And ultimately, again, you get 13 goals out of a fourth liner. That's terrific production for me. So even though he slowed down the stretch in the regular season, I was, when looking at his overall body of work, impressed with what he did over 82 games. And then, of course, just really disappointed with his playoffs.
Okay, let's talk about Nils Hoglander, who in the regular season, I gave him an A plus. This was a breakout year for Nils Hoglander. And then in the playoffs, with those expectations of being an impact player like that, I gave him a C minus.
Yeah, basically bang on with what I had him at. I had him with an A in the regular season, especially not just what he did offensively, but as the season progressed, for him to earn Rick Tocchet's trust to take on a top six role. And for a while there, from the All-Star break till the end of the campaign, he was able to stick as Elias Pettersson's running mate. And I know Pettersson individually was still struggling, but Pettersson on many nights gave that line a spark, was forechecking, was energy, 5-on-5 production. But I'm right there with you. Playoffs was disappointing. Hopefully it's a learning experience. I had him at a C minus for the playoffs as well.
Yeah, and I think that's very fair. I think that's a very fair grade for Nils Hoglander. Okay, who do we have left? We got PDG, Nils Aman. Do you want to do Podkolzin? Like, do you want
to? Sure. Yeah, we can do Podkolzin.
I don't want to give a hard take on Podkolzin, but it's becoming increasingly clear, it feels, that he's just going to be a guy. Like, he's not going to be, like, I think the idea that he's ever going to become a top 6, top 9 forward, like, he's going to be a grinding winger. And really, I don't know why he's not killing penalties regularly, or why he wasn't doing that in Abbotsford, why that, and we've been seeing this for 2 years on this show. Why isn't Vasily Podkolzin becoming a penalty killer? Because if he's ever going to stick at the NHL, it feels like that's what he's going to do. Is he's going to have to be like a grinder. He's going to have to be, a third, fourth line winger. He's not going to drive play. He's not the best finisher. I don't know what to think about Vasily Podkolzin, but I think it's just become increasingly clear, especially with these playoffs and this regular season that we saw from him, that it's like he's probably never going to be like a regular must-have NHLer.
Yeah, for sure. I gave him a C for the regular season. And I know people will say, well, he had spurts where he was bringing energy and physicality, but ultimately this is a player who had 0 goals and just 2 assists in 18 games. And as you mentioned, what is he bringing to the table? Maybe he can carve out a role as an energy, physical presence type of guy, but defensively, he's still not trusted by his coaches. Like, there's a reason that it took him so long to draw into the playoff lineup. Whether it's right or wrong in the coach's mind, they still don't have that full faith in him, and that's part of the reason why he hasn't been developed as a penalty killer. Podkolzin is, like, I truly believe that had his development path gone a different way, that he actually still had the tools to be a good middle 6 forward at one point. I don't think he's going to hit it now, but I think it's between the ears for him. I really believe that. I think he's too afraid of making mistakes. Yep. I think it goes back to when he was in the KHL for so many years. And the thing is, when you're a player that has a lot of potential, you need to be given opportunity. You need to feel like the man. You need to be put in a role where your responsibility is to drive offense, is to create chances, to produce, to feel like the go-to guy, to play power play 1, to play first unit PK. But in SCA, when every other player his age category is playing a frontline role in the NCAA or in junior hockey, he's out here playing like 7-8 minutes a night in the KHL. He's worried about stepping on eggshells. Really, that's what it is. He's so afraid of making a mistake that he doesn't trust his instincts at all, because he knows the second I make a mistake, I'm going to get benched. And so he's become the ultimate, like, safe player. I even remember when he first got sent down to Abbotsford, I think maybe it was last season, that I had a conversation with Ryan Johnson, and they tried to tell him, like, one of the things that they want him to do is play less of a safe game and, like, move his feet more, look to actually dictate. That just has never really come to fruition, and it's why he'll, unfortunately, probably be nothing more than a replacement level 4th line fringe guy, despite having a lot of NHL traits.
Yep, and I mean, not to just zero in on Podkolzin and rag on him, but this is why it's so important that the picks you make hit, because a guy taken later in that draft, Thomas Harley, like, he's having a huge impact on the Dallas Stars. We have to be the Canucks podcast that brings up Thomas Harley more than any other podcast when we talk about the Dallas Stars and how they're succeeding and how that might be a blueprint for how the Canucks can succeed over the next few years. Like, Thomas Harley taken in that draft, Tobias Bjornfot, he's picked up awards votes before. He was also taken in that draft. But in all seriousness, like, Dylan Holloway, look at the impact Dylan Holloway started to make in that series. That's kind of an under-discussed portion of the second round series with the Canucks and Oilers, was how Holloway stepped in. I know you and I touched on it yesterday, Harm, but man, yeah, like, you look at it and just say, like, how different does this Canucks lineup look if Podkolzin is a real impact player?
Yeah, and of course, to clarify, I'm sure you're not like, Holloway and Podkolzin were different draft classes, I believe, and but it's more just about, like, you take your sort of mid-ish first round pick, and like, you need that guy to hit, because even in specifically Podkolzin's draft year in 2019, Boldy was taken shortly after, Caulfield was taken shortly after. It's definitely an unfortunate miss there.
Yeah, I mean, it's not nothing's gonna be as bad as the Ollie Levy miss, right? Like we're not doing that. We're not doing the Ollie Levy thing here. But yeah, Holloway was the 2021, I think. Or no, he was 2020, and Podkolzin was 2019. That's it. Yeah,
I think so,
Holloway was the weird COVID draft or whatever. Or no, that I guess the COVID draft was the 2021. Anyways, moving on from that, let's get to our next player on the list, Nils Aman. Like, what are we expecting from Nils Aman? Like, how are you giving a letter grade to Nils Aman? I gave Nils Aman a B. Like, I gave Nils Aman a B in the regular season. I gave him a C+ in the playoffs. He was fine.
Yeah, just a shrug, and he was fine. It's probably the best way to sum up Aman. Yeah. I think you were too kind on his regular season personally, because I didn't see a significant enough year-over-year improvement. Right? Last year, he was a surprise as like, okay, this guy coming over from Sweden makes a team out of camp. He can hang in an NHL role. There's clearly some room to improve. And then I even remember watching him in training camp and thinking, man, he, from a physical tools perspective, has leveled up. Like, he looked faster. He looked stronger. And yet he didn't actually take the next step in his play during the regular season. And to me, he's a player at this point that is reliable enough defensively that he's not going to hurt you, and he can play second unit PK minutes. So there's some value in that. But to me, he needs to become an elite faceoff man, right? If you want to stick as like an everyday fourth line center, he has to find that niche as an elite faceoff guy, because right now he is awful at draws, and that's just too much to overcome if you're trying to be like this defensive utility fourth line center.
Yeah, and the thing I was looking for the most with Aman was just his ability to not get pushed off the puck so easy. And I think that was the thing that Rick Tocchet really spoke about at the end of last season, was this idea that if you're going to stick where we want you to stick, and that's in a fourth line role, you've got to be winning board battles, and you have to be pretty hard for guys to push off the puck. And I don't know if there was enough improvement there. I definitely think there was some when it comes to the physical side of the game, but yeah, nothing special for Nils Aman. Okay, Phil Giuseppe. I was very generous with Phil. I had Phil at a A- in the regular season.
Jesus, man.
Oh, come on. He was playing on the top line for, how long was he there? Like 2 months? 1 month?
Yeah, like 6 weeks or something.
Well, come on. That buys you that if he had done that all season, he's an A++.
Yeah,
he only did it for a bit.
And how much did he produce there?
Look, man, it's not about how much you produce. He was there, and they were winning games at the end of the day, and that was a line that was playing really well.
And he was like a D player the rest of the way.
Yeah, but he missed some time. I feel for Phil. I feel for Phil. I am at an A-. Maybe it's too high.
You're just giving him love because he's Italian.
And he's a friend of the show. He's been on Canucks Combo, and he's
a very nice guy. But
yeah,
I give him a C+ for the regular season and a C+ for playoffs.
Wow, you hate Phil Giuseppe.
I mean, relative to you, I guess.
Okay, what did you have in the playoffs?
A C+.
Okay, I had a B- in the playoffs. Yeah.
See, B-, I'm like, okay, I can at least live with. That's an acceptable level of call it bias, call it homerism. But what was the grade again for the regular season? An A-.
A-. It's not that,
dude. That is pretty crazy. Like, if you said B, I would have been like, you're being a homer, but I'll let it slide. A- that's foul.
Okay, fine. I'll officially lower my grade for Phil Giuseppe. Well, I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm sticking with it. Phil Giuseppe gets an A- for me. Oh, you know who we haven't talked about, Harmon? Elias Lindholm. We didn't talk about him.
Yeah.
Regular season, like not including his time in Calgary, right? We're just including his regular season time with the Canucks. Relative to expectations, I had him in a C- in the regular season. And then I had him and C- is maybe too low because he was really good defensively and he was good on faceoffs and everything. But I just think what we were expecting from him, like I'm trying to grade this relative to expectations, right? I did have Lindholm at a C-, and then in the playoffs, I had him at an A.
Yeah, so in the regular season, when Drancer and I did it, we gave him an incomplete just because of the whole injury situation. And you're like, okay, this guy was banged up. So that's maybe a cop out. If I had to give a letter grade purely on performance, ignoring the injury aspect, then yeah, I mean, I'd probably be in C territory, C plus, maybe if I'm being generous. So not too far off what you had for him. And then for the playoffs, I had an A minus for him.
I like A minus. I like A minus. He was a totally different player. He was the reverse Nils Hoglander.
He was their third best forward after Boeser and Miller.
Yep. Yeah. No disagreement there. And he's going to be a big topic of conversation as we go on into the offseason. Like, let's be honest here. So, are we done forwards now? Did we forget anybody?
Lafferty. Or did we? Did you?
No,
give
we
your
did
grade?
Lafferty.
Okay, my bad.
Yeah. It was bad grades. Like, we did give our grades for Lafferty.
Yeah,
right?
we did. Yeah, okay. You're right.
Good. Have we forgotten anybody then? Like, I think we got every forward.
I think we got the forwards.
Okay. Danila Klimovic? No, we're not doing it. Yeah, okay. So we got all the forwards. Let's move on to the defense. Quinn Hughes, regular season. I know your grade, my grade as well. A plus. Playoffs, I had him at a B.
Yeah, pretty similar. A plus for the regular season and a B plus for the playoffs. Even though, and like the interesting thing is, like, even though he wasn't taking games over offensively the way we expected, and even though the improvements that he showed as a shooter and as an individual scorer in the regular season didn't translate to the playoffs, it was still a night and day difference in terms of how well the Canucks drove play with Quinn Hughes on the ice compared to any other defense pairing. It was a massive, monumental difference. And I was actually surprised at how much he tilted the ice when, to my eye, he visibly struggled to move the puck with the same level of escapability, poise, and sort of being a one-man breakout machine compared to the regular season. Like, I didn't think he was actually that impressive on zone exits as we're accustomed to. And yet, from a possession and territorial standpoint, the Canucks were still, like, it was lopsided, where when he was on the ice, the Canucks dominated play. When he wasn't on the ice, the Canucks got caved and hemmed in defensively.
Okay, Filip Hronek. What did you have here? I had a B plus for the regular season, and I had a C plus for the playoffs.
Yeah, pretty similar. At a B plus for the regular season. He was terrific through the first 50 games of the season, looked like an elite supporting piece, and then sort of fell off, looked like a passenger down the stretch. And then into the playoffs, I had him at, I'm trying to remember what I wrote, whether it was a C minus or a C. I think I had him at a C ultimately.
Yeah, I think it's a very fair grade. I think it's a fair grade for what we saw in the playoffs. And like you said, it was kind of an extension of what we saw down the tail end of the regular season. Every time we talk about him, I'm going to make sure I say it clearly in case we have new listeners. Do not sign Filip Hronek to anything that starts with an 8 as the average. No, just can't. You just can't do it. And we're going to have a long off season to talk about all that, but you can't do it. Moving on, Tyler Myers. Oh, Harmon, I was waiting for this. Tyler Myers, A plus, A plus.
Oh, come on. You did not actually give him an A plus, A plus.
I'm not saying relative to your cap hit. It's relative to expectations.
I know it's not relative to. Well, okay. How low were your expectations? Did you expect him to be like awful coming into the season?
No, he's my golden star boy. I have him this high on my expectations, but everybody else is slagging on him. His expectations for Tyler Myers were super low coming into this season. But I always say it. I always say Tyler Myers is criminally underrated. And this year, he wasn't. He was great. He was great all season long.
He can't be. Okay, so let me clarify. I have what I would consider like nice grades for him. I thought he had a good season, but he cannot be an A plus when you consider how disastrous the start to the season was.
Okay, that's fair.
Do you remember that?
Scratched at the start of the year. So I'm going to change my grade officially for Tyler Myers. I'm going to give him an A minus.
Okay, see, that's actually close to fair. I had him at a B plus for the regular season. For the playoffs, I had him at a B minus, which might seem a little bit harsh. And this will be sort of an extension of the Soucy discussion as well, because to me, that defense pair was bend but don't break in the playoffs. Right. And so you can say, yes, they defended the inside really well. They didn't allow backdoor passes. They, for the most part, held up McDavid, but the Canucks generated zero offense with that defense pair on the ice. And that wasn't just like, of course, you cut them some slack for the second round because they were mostly up against McDavid. But even in the Nashville series, like when we discuss Vancouver's difficulty manufacturing offense, I think a lot of it does start with after Quinn Hughes, you didn't have enough like truly high-end defensemen in your lineup. So to me, Myers did his job perfectly fine in the playoffs, like considering what he is as a player versus what role he was put into. I was happy with his playoff performance, but I don't think we can overlook just how anemic the Canucks were offensively with Myers on the ice.
That's fair. Moving on, we have Carson Soucy. Carson Soucy, relative to expectations, I had him at an A, and similar to what you were just saying about the playoffs, I had him at a B+ in the playoffs.
Yeah, so I had him at a B- for the playoffs, and then trying to pull up my regular season grade here. One sec. B+ for the regular season. And again, like this is where when I think we would be surprised a little bit. The Canucks were outshot 88-32 with Soucy on the ice at 5-on-5. Like they got their teeth kicked in territorially, but again, they defended well. They limited the actual damage on the scoreboard. So it's a matter of, okay, they did their job, but put it this way, Myers is going to be a free agent. And for as much as he played well and you're thinking, okay, what if you can bring him back? What I think about is what if Carson Soucy had had the type of partner who could actually move the puck and sort of handle those sort of puck transportation responsibilities while also being decent enough defensively to hold down a matchup role. Like what if Soucy had an actual like high-end partner? Because with Soucy, I loved his play without the puck. I thought he was great on the PK as well. But in the regular season, on many occasions, I was praising how, okay, under pressure, he's actually more poised with the puck than I thought. In the playoffs, I thought he had a really tough time breaking it out. And not that he had egregious turnovers, but he just couldn't make clean exits. And I don't think that's like, I'm not going to criticize him for that because he's a $3.25 million defenseman. If Soucy could defend the way he could and move pucks out, he'd be like a $5 million defenseman. But moving forward, it's just like in a perfect world, you'd love to get him a puck mover because then it's like, that's like an actually high-end shutdown pair. Because again, offensively, the Canucks generated less than 13 shots on goal per hour offensively with Soucy on the ice. Like nothing was happening for the Canucks from an attacking perspective.
Okay, we're at the bottom pair now. Nikita Zadorov, Ian Cole. Nikita Zadorov, I had him at a B for the regular season. I had him at an A for the playoffs.
Yeah, I think I had him exactly the same for both regular season and playoffs. Because, yeah, I mean, in the regular season, he was decent. He filled the gaps when necessary. Of course, Soucy was hurt when Zadorov first came in, and he was a stabilizing, much-needed presence there. But he wasn't blowing anybody away. He wasn't knocking anybody's socks off. There's nobody screaming and shouting, "You have to keep Nikita Zadorov." But in the playoffs, he was such a monster. He did everything, throwing the bone-crushing hits, chipping in with offense, having enough speed and skill, like just enough so that he wasn't a liability moving the puck. Terrific playoffs for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Ian Cole. Ian Cole had him at a B+ for the regular season. I had him at a C+ for the playoffs.
Yeah, so B+ for the regular season, and I know Drancer gave him a C+ in the report cards. I was a little bit more harsh. I for the purposes of this, it didn't actually show up in print, but I had him at a C. Of course, he was hurt, which Rick Dollywell reported, so that's important context. But I just think that Oilers series was so tough that, like, put it this way. When we're discussing playoffs, I thought it was unfair to give Myers and Soucy a B- and then have Cole at a C+. Like I needed more of a gap between those guys just because I do think there was a pretty significant gap between how well Soucy/Myers played and then how much, where Cole's performance was at.
Okay. We do need to wrap up and get to anyone else, so let's not go too much further. Do you want to just finish on Noah Juulsen? Like goalies, I don't think we really have to do. It's pretty obvious who is going to get, like, what the grades are going to be for the goaltenders. Let's quickly just do it. Don't need to explain it. I have an A+ for Thatcher Demko. Obviously, it's a bit incomplete in the playoffs. A+ for the regular season for Demko. Also an A+ in his one game that he played of the playoffs. Archer Shilovs, I had his regular season as a B. He didn't play great in the AHL, but that really doesn't matter when you come out and play the way you do in the playoffs. Archer Shilovs is an A+ as well. And I feel like we don't really need to give grades for Casey DeSmith, but if I do, I have him at a B+ and a B+.
Yeah, let's just leave it at that. I don't have goalie grades off the top of my head.
No worries. Okay, Noah Juulsen. I had him in an A+ and an A+. No, I'm kidding. I didn't. I had Noah Juulsen at actually I should pull it up. Yeah, okay. I had Noah Juulsen at a C+ for the regular season. He took some really big strides. He was really good, but also, became quite clear he wasn't going to be more than a third pairing guy. And then in the playoffs, I had him at a C.
Wow, I'm going to be higher on Juulsen than you for once.
Wow. Okay,
let's hear it. For the regular season.
Oh, that's fair. Yeah,
because good. Putting it this way, he was in the AHL last year.
Mm-hmm.
And so for him to be a serviceable 6'7" defenseman, and I know he was for the first 6 weeks awful, but from that point onward, he was really steady and sturdy. You didn't worry about having him in the lineup or, he's our sixth defenseman. Can we trust him? Plus, he was excellent on the PK, in my opinion. So I give him B in the regular season. For the playoffs, he only played 2 games. He wasn't great in either one, to be totally honest. He had an egregious mistake in both playoff games that he appeared in that led to a goal against. So for the playoffs, it's only 2 games, so it's tough to grade a guy, but it probably would be a C for me as well there.
Okay, that wraps up our letter grades. Let's get to our poll question. We've got a lot to get to today. But yeah, let's get to our poll. Actually, before that, let me tell you about 4 wins. I'm gonna do 4 wins right now because I'm excited. I'm just excited to talk about it. I'm excited to talk about Nectaris. If you're looking for something refreshing on a hot day like today, we recommend you check out the 4 Winds Nectaris Sour Ale. This delicious beer has won a plethora of local and national awards, including Beer of the Year at the Canadian Brewing Awards a few years back. It's light and juicy with a nice tart finish, so whether you're getting ready to go out into the yard for a barbecue or just hanging out on the patio, you should complement the day with a tall can of 4 Winds Nectaris, available at liquor stores across the province or for home delivery through the online shop at 4windsbrewing.ca. Okay, let's get to our poll question. Grady, can you pull it up? And folks, get your anyone else's in because it's going to be a busy final stretch of the show. That ended up taking us like 45 minutes. I didn't think that segment would take that long, but that's a really, we went in depth on a lot of the picks that we made, and I thought it was a good segment. It was a good one. So let's get to our poll question, which is brought to you by Mr. Lube. We are keeping it very simple today with today's poll question. It is about who exceeded expectations the most in the playoffs. Elias Lindholm, Brock Boeser, Archer Shilovs, and some names you could maybe put in other. Obviously, Nikita Zadorov, JT Miller could maybe be in there, but it is pretty overwhelmingly in favor of Archer Shilovs when it comes to the poll. 74% of voters say Archer Shilovs, 13% say Brock Boeser, 11% say Elias Lindholm, and just 1.5% of people said other. Other. And Elias Lindholm had 11.3, 13.4 for Boeser, 73.8 for Archer Shilovs. Harm, no disagreement there. I maybe should have thought of a better poll question. Shilovs, in terms of expectations, if we're asking who exceeded them the most, it's undoubtedly Archer Shilovs.
Yeah, zero doubt there. After that, it's probably Zadorov. And Grady's saying the same things. Shilovs and Zadorov for him. It's those guys 1 and 2 for me.
Okay. There it is. That was a poll question, which was brought to you by Mr. Lube. Need a tire change or tire service? Mr. Lube provides no appointment tire service and sales. Drop by anytime for tire rotation, tire repair, and balancing. Servicing all makes and models, including electric vehicles. Find them at one of their 16 locations in the Lower Mainland. For one near you, go to mrlube.com. Okay, now let's take a quick break and finish off with anyone else. Time now for a word from helpstartshere.gov.bc.ca. Everybody knows about the overdose crisis, also known as the toxic drug crisis, but what's less known is that the stigma around addiction makes it harder to ask for help, and that's got to stop. Addiction is a complex health condition, not a choice, and that means people shouldn't have to face judgment at work or from their loved ones or fear the law. But shame and stigma can cause a person to hide their drug use or use alone, and we don't want that. People shouldn't be afraid to reach out. There are supports available, and it can help to know where to start. The government of BC is partnering with organizations like the Nation Network to help extend this message throughout our province. If you or someone you care about is struggling, you can find supports and services near you at helpstartshere.gov.bc.ca.
Sorry, I had to unmute there.
All good.
It's time now for anyone else presented by the Vancouver Canadians. The great spring weather is here, and it's time to get out to the net to catch your Vancouver Canadians in action. The Seas are on the road, but have a 6-game homestand starting on Tuesday, May 28th, which includes the superstar appearance by Buck Martinez on the 28th, the Nooner at the Net on Friday, May 31st, and a family fun Sunday on June 2nd. Catch fireworks, giveaways, Friday Nooners, and superstar appearances all spring and summer long. To get your tickets, call 604-872-5232. Go to CanadiansBaseball.com.
Okay, I asked for ideas how we could be more creative because there was someone earlier saying we were dull and uncreative, Harm, during this segment because he said this should have taken 5 minutes. And hey, you know what? Guy's onto something because that segment probably shouldn't have taken us 45 minutes. Might be onto something.
Here's the thing, like, I thought it'd be boring if we're just like B plus, B minus, A. Like, what's the point of throwing out letter grades?
That would be
dumb. Like, what's the point of throwing out letter grades without actually having a discussion or discussing the pros and cons of a particular player's season?
Yeah, I made the mistake of saying like I was onto something. He was out to lunch. They were just completely wrong. But I did ask for suggestions. So people said I could wear a mullet wig and reenact the Talk It Spaghetti video. This is another thing that happened. This is another thing that I thought about over the weekend, Harm. If I ever get like a hater or whatever, I'm just gonna say, come meet me in person. I'll pitch a ball to you. I'll give you 10 pitches. If you can make solid contact on one of them, I'll just give you $200. Like I'll just give you $200 if you can just make solid contact with me pitching to you.
Wait, can I sign up for this?
Yeah, I think so. I think I could take you. Let's do it.
You probably could, but like we should do it for fun.
Yeah, we will. Okay, this is good off-season content, fellas. This is good. Grady's in as well. Let's go. If you can make solid contact, like I'm not even saying you got to hit a bomb, nothing like that. Like good contact, no foul balls, no slow rollers or anything.
But can you take pitches?
Of course you can take pitches. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I just want to make sure, like, just
no,
like throwing pitches in the dirt. Like, no. Hitting this.
Yeah, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4. No. I'll give you good pitches. They are gonna move a lot. Like that's the thing. They are gonna move a lot. No, and this is Ty David asked this. Quads, you got some heat on that arm? Absolutely not. But I know how to move baseball in basically every direction. I could never throw hard. I just had really good control when I pitched. It's been a while, but I'll come out. I don't know how hard I even throw. Really, I just changed speeds. It's just changing speeds. Backdoor cutters. Are either of you guys a lefty? You swing left?
I'm lefty.
Oh, yeah. We're going to have to get an umpire out because you're going to take strikes. Like, you will take strikes. I'm just going to throw you backdoor cutters. Yeah. Oh, my gosh, so does Grady. You guys are toast. Anyways, we'll do it. The good off-season content. We'll do it. Yeah. We'll get Faber out there, too. It'll be a lot of fun. Faber, although
he's a lefty too, isn't he?
I ain't making Faber can bat left, but I ain't making a bet that Faber can't make solid contact with me. Faber played very, very high level. Faber can make solid contact. Like people will remember that video we always talked about of him at Nat Bailey Stadium. They had a media day, the Canadians did, and Faber was hitting them out of Nat Bailey Stadium, like at the warning track, out of the park. Yeah, I ain't challenging Faber to this, but anybody else, come on out. Gonna be fun. Okay, let's get to anyone else's here, which is fittingly brought to you by the Vancouver Canadians. This one, Ty David, when is Frank gonna deliver the pie? I don't know when he's coming to Vancouver next, but that'll be it. I'm not chasing after that pie. Frank's coming to Vancouver, and we'll eat the pie. It'll be a good time. Okay, Rajcraft, this is one that we should ask Harm. Do you think Hronek would get the same value in a trade? Has his value increased or decreased? I know the discourse around Philip Hronek has kind of turned a little bit here, but let's not forget what this player is. Like, this is a player who is a top 4 defenseman. He's going to be viewed as a top pairing defenseman by a lot of teams. Like, you look at how valuable that position is, right? Like a right shot, play creating guy, a guy who can quarterback your first power play unit. He's not going to do it in Vancouver, but you think of it, I don't want to try and think of specific examples, but like Columbus, for example, is one that it's like, okay, the Columbus Blue Jackets could certainly use Filip Hronek. Like, he would probably be a much more useful piece for the Blue Jackets than he is the Canucks. They might even be comfortable paying him like an 8.5 or whatever.
Probably not, because they already made their Hronek like splash with Damon Severson. And their right sides, and like their right side's already loaded with Severson, Goodbranson. They have David Juracek coming, one of their top prospects.
If they ever call him up.
I know. But like, I agree. Teams are always shopping for right shot defensemen, but I just wanted to push back against the notion of Columbus specifically.
That's fair. I like Severson. How long is Severson signed for?
Like forever, like another 7 years. It's a bad contract, man.
Holy smokes. End of 2030, 31, David Severson. I did not realize he was signed that long. Okay, so maybe Columbus isn't the best example, which is why I said I didn't really want to give an example, but you get what I'm saying, right? Like, this is a guy that's going to be viewed pretty well by more than just one or two teams. So, look, the Canucks kind of hold the cards here in a trade. Like, it's not like they have no leverage if they go into a trade.
My only worry with Hronek's potential trade value would be how much are the demands for his next contract going to scare potential interested parties off? Because, like, honestly, if I was another team looking for top 4 right shot defenseman, of course I'd be interested in Filip Hronek, but not at $8 million, like, and not if that's what he's looking for. So I wonder how much his contract demands are going to potentially sour his trade value. He's still going to have value, no doubt about it. But this is where I'm going to be interested to. I'll try and do some digging over the course of the summer and just make some calls, get some insights from execs around the league on typically for a player and team in this situation, what might his value actually look like? What might potentially interested teams be thinking?
Okay. Quads full, or excuse me. People are asking about what is solid contacts and all that sort of stuff. We'll get to that later. We'll get to it another day. But this one from Matt03 is Pods full time next year, and not a fan, but Lekkerimaki. Like, are we going to see Lekkerimaki? I think they're going to give him a good look in training camp. Harman, I'm going to pivot this question a little bit because Podkolzin's a full-time player if he comes into training camp and has that identity. Hasn't had it yet. If he has that, he's going to be a full-time player. We don't know if that's going to happen. On the topic of Lekkerimaki, do you think the Canucks need to be careful at all going into free agency, going into the offseason, trying to address that winger need? Do you think like they must have an idea of where Lekkerimaki might fit in and when he's going to be ready to make that jump to the NHL level? And I don't think it's as soon as next year.
Yeah, I think you slow cook him. I think you marinate him. The other thing to keep in mind is this team's arc, or where they are at their cycle, is completely different than, let's say, a few years ago. A few years ago, it'd be so easy to say, let's insert prospects in. Why not throw Nils Hoglander into the lineup? Why not allow a Vasily Podkolzin to make the NHL right away, or a Jake Virtanen, or an Adam Gaudette? But now the Canucks are trying to take the next step and become consistent Stanley Cup contenders. And so that means they're like, a head coach like Rick Tocchet isn't going to have a ton of time for growing pains for a player or developing. Yep. Like, this is a win now team, and that means the results have to be there. Because of that, I don't think you can go wrong with letting him cook in the American League first. And look, if he dominates and at some point down the season, you, because of injury or just performance, need some more scoring pop, then maybe you consider a late season call up or something along those lines. But if I was mapping it out right now, barring a miracle at training camp, I would start Lekkerimaki in the AHL.
I think you're absolutely right. And you give him a chance, like you give him the chance in training camp, right? But I think you're absolutely correct on this. The one thing that I want to touch on is Abbotsford, because we just brought it up a little bit in development and all that sort of stuff. A lot of noise around Jeremy Colleton right now. I don't have any real update or anything like that to give, but obviously we heard the initial report that the Canucks had fired him, and then we saw the report that there was a contract offered to him. We don't know what's going on with Colleton right now, but the one thing I will say in all of the conversations I've had with folks behind the scenes and just around the game, Harm, is that when Jeremy Colleton was in Abbotsford, he could have had an NHL job at multiple points. Like, this is a guy who not only has coached over 200 games in the NHL, he was doing a really good job in Abbotsford. So you look at the San Jose opening, and I saw Friedman wondering aloud if maybe Colleton had taken an interview with San Jose. All I'm going to say is that Colleton's super well respected. He did a great job in Abbotsford. Don't know if he's gone or not or anything like that. But what I will say is every conversation I had with someone in the game that knows about Colleton, it was always glowing praise. And it was always, yeah, that guy could coach in the NHL right now if he wanted to.
Yeah. If it's a case where outside interest isn't a factor and it simply comes down to, do the Canucks want to keep him? Do they want to extend him? Then it's a no-brainer. He's done a terrific job. And let's remember that Colleton was handpicked by Patrick Allvin and Jim Rutherford. This isn't a leftover coach from the last regime. They went out and they, and through the lengthy process, specifically chose him. And to the best of my knowledge, he's done an impressive job as well, considering even this year, look at how undermanned Abbotsford was at times. This isn't like 2 years ago, for example, when the Canucks were handing out a ton of one-way contracts to players in the American League that's a way of, like, if you spend, you can boost your American League roster. The Canucks didn't do a ton of that compared to when the team first moved to Abbotsford. And yet they still fared pretty well.
Yep. A lot of young players too. A lot of young players, and they have the emphasis on developing guys to play for the Vancouver Canucks, and they've done a really good job of that. So yeah, nothing but positivity when it comes to Jeremy Colleton. I've always loved my dealings with him. Again, friend of the show, been on the show multiple times. Yeah, always liked Jeremy Colleton. Really honest guy. Yeah, can't say enough good things about him. Okay. Sheldon Keefe is the new head coach of the New Jersey Devils. RA from Spit and Chicklets reported that, and then our own Frank Saravalli confirmed it about 17 minutes later. I noticed that. So Sheldon Keefe to the New Jersey Devils.
Yeah, New Jersey is a great coaching gig, right? Talk about a team that is up and coming, has great contracts. Yeah, they're a younger team, so there are going to be some growing pains from that perspective. They need some more shutdown blue liners. They need to shore up their goaltending. Like, there are areas they need to improve, but this team has a long runway of contending. And going into that gig, the expectations aren't going to be sky high. Like, they're going to be high, right? The Devils need to make the playoffs, but I feel like because of the down year that they had, people aren't expecting them to now all of a sudden be Stanley Cup contenders next year. So you can afford to, let's say, have a great regular season. And even if you don't find immediate playoff success, like, you've got probably 1 year of buffer to sort of instill habits, foundations, build some experience with the players before the expectations then, and maybe year 2 ratchet to, like, okay, you actually have to contend for a Stanley Cup now. And for Sheldon Keefe, like, as abysmal as his playoff track record has been, his regular season track record is stellar. And when a team like Toronto chokes, you have to wonder how much of it is just the players. Like, if you're Sheldon Keefe, and I don't think he did a perfect job in Toronto, but what can you do when your goaltender can't make a save and you've got a roster that has most of your cap space tied into 4 players, and those 4 players, like, usually one of those guys is hurt. Usually most of them are underperforming. Like,
yeah.
Like, what can you do? What buttons can you push? Right. The power play, I'd say, is the biggest area where you're like, okay, the coaching staff has an impact on that. Why does the power play always disappear in the playoffs for Toronto? Like, special teams have bit them in the rear. That's definitely an area of criticism, but I actually don't mind the fit for New Jersey and Keefe there.
No, not at all. Okay. I think that's it. I think we'll close out anyone else there. We got to get to our daily face-off playoff parlay challenge picks. Folks, you can go play the game yourself over at games.dailyfaceoff.com. It's simple and it runs all playoffs long. Just answer some questions. Winners pocket gift cards. Daily winners, excuse me, pocket gift cards. And the winners of each round, cash. Cold, hard cash. You can play now at games.dailyfaceoff.com. Okay, let's see my picks. Yeah, here we go. So Florida, New York tonight. I've got the Rangers winning, and we got to update our brackets. We'll have to do it after game one, but we'll update our brackets for tomorrow's show. I think there's player avails tomorrow, so it's going to be a busy show, but we'll try to update our brackets at some point here pretty soon. I have the under 5.5 total goals in the game. First goal going to Florida, the high scoring period being the third period. Artemi Panarin picking up an assist, Alex Barkov picking up an assist, Sam Reinhart scoring a goal, and Artemi Panarin scoring a goal as well. I think it's a big night for the bread man. I am picking the Rangers to win game one. Okay, let's get to our Bet365 bet of the day, which is brought to you by, you guessed it, Bet365, a proud partner of Canucks Conversation. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Be sure to use code VANBONUS when you sign up for an account. I'm sticking with my Rangers. Yes, my Rangers. They are minus 105 on the money line, slight underdogs at home against the Panthers in game one of the Eastern Conference Finals. I am going with the Rangers at minus 105. Must be 90 plus play. If you choose to play, please play responsibly. Harm, this was a fun show. We'll be back tomorrow at the Wall Center breaking down the Canucks availabilities. I'll close it on this with you, Harm. I asked Jeff this yesterday. I'll ask you as we close out the show. What are you hoping to hear from the players tomorrow?
I mean, injuries is one of the biggest question marks that we're all wondering
Adds
about.
context,
so,
right? Like adds a lot of context.
100%. So, that I'm curious to hear about. I'm also curious, just big picture, to hear from specific guys about their openness to re-sign or not, right? Their contract situations. I'm sure Hronek's not going to say much, for example, but Lindholm, Joshua, Zadorov, like all of these guys, who sounds most keen about the idea of returning. Sometimes those answers can be quite illuminating, right? I remember last year, for example, Ryan O'Reilly sort of had a lukewarm answer about, like, he gave a ton of praise about the city of Toronto and how the organization treated him, but I remember the vibe definitely being like this sounds like a player who's saying thank you for all the time here, but I'm piecing out to get the bag. Yeah. And so I'm going to be curious if we get any sense of who might be interested in staying, who might be interested in leaving as well.
Going to be interesting, and we'll be back tomorrow to break it all down. But for now, we are signing off. For my co-host Harman Dial and our technical producer Grady Sass, my name is David Quadrelli. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Canucks Conversation.